I grew up in a small town. My mother worked 2 jobs to support us financially. When I was 7 years old, my dad left my mom and never came back. And my brother, unfortunately, has autism. Unlike others, he is actually a bit better in his condition, though he rarely talks or expresses like a normal person, but he can do his basic chores. Most of the day, he sits near the window and watches the world outside. This incident happened when I was 15 years old and my brother Jack was 11. My mom was working a night shift on a Thursday, so basically, it was just me and my brother. We were kinda used to staying on our own at night, because we had no other choice. Our neighbor next door was an alcoholic man. He had a son close to my age, but we often heard the man screaming at his son late at night. This particular night, I was sitting in our living room and watching TV. My brother was upstairs, lying on his bed. Suddenly, I heard huge chaos outside. I opened the door and saw 3 or 4 people had gathered in front of our neighbor's house. Within 5 to 7 minutes, a cop arrived. They sealed the entire house within seconds. Paramedics even came out and took a body on a stretcher. Behind them, I saw the father getting into an ambulance with a bleeding head. At first, I couldn't understand what was going on. After hearing the conversations of the people gathering in front of the scene, it gave me a clear idea of what just happened. The father reported to 911 saying a homeless man broke into their house and tried to rob them. He hit the father with a baseball bat and badly injured him. He fell to the floor in terrible pain. The father saw the son rushing towards the man to stop him. It was just when the man hit his son on the back of the head and he fell to the floor. The man then stole his wallet, had a few electronics, and escaped the premises. Right after suffering a huge blood clotting inside the brain, his son died in the hospital that night. Our entire town was shook in fear. No one expected such a terrible tragedy. The father arranged a small funeral for his son, and we attended. Everyone paid their condolences to him. The local sheriff assured him that they would find the guy who destroyed his family. Our neighbor, Mr. Feynman, had changed after his son's death. I often saw him sitting on the porch with a terrified face. I could tell that he was suffering the trauma of that night, every single second. I mean, no doubt, it would have been horrifying to watch your son dying on the floor at the hands of an intruder and not being able to do anything. Mr. Feynman has been drinking a lot after that incident. He pleaded with the sheriff to let him move out as he was traumatized to live in that house. But the ongoing investigation compelled him to stay back. About a week after the incident, I started to notice some weird behavior in my brother. Even though we never discussed the death of the boy next door, I'm sure my brother must have realized something happened to our neighbors. One day, I was doing my schoolwork sitting in the living room. It was a boring, rainy afternoon. Jack was sitting next to the living room window and watching the raindrops. Suddenly, I heard him chuckle. I looked at him and saw he was looking outside and laughing at something. The street and neighboring houses were visible from that window. I asked him,
"What's so funny, Jack?"
He chuckled and said,
Him.
and pointed out the window. I immediately got up and walked towards the window. I stood next to my brother and looked out. Like I said, it was raining outside. The rain wasn't that heavy, which is why I could see the empty street clearly. As far as my eyes went, I didn't see a single living creature outside. I thought to myself, Jack was probably imagining something, and I laughed at it. That night, when we all sat for dinner, Jack surprised all of us. My mom served him some food and placed the plate in front of him to eat. But Jack got up and slowly went to the kitchen. He then brought an extra plate and placed it on the table right beside him.
Why did you bring an extra plate?
My mom said. He looked beside him, as if someone was actually sitting on the chair next to him, and smiled on his own. I was feeling very odd about his behavior. I said,
"Jack, Mom is asking you something."
He then looked at our mom and said,
He's hungry, Mom. Serve him too. He's hungry.
My mom and I were absolutely stunned by Jack's behavior. My mom replied in a low, calm voice.
Who is he?
Jack chuckled and said,
My friend, William.
We just thought that like every normal kid, Jack had an imaginary friend. So, that night, we didn't react to his sudden weird behavior, as he seemed happy. So we decided to play along with this. Jack often talked and smiled on his own. Whenever someone asked, he said he was talking to his friend William. Things never took a different turn, so Jack's behavior never worried me that way. That was until one night, I woke up in my room and heard footsteps going down the stairs. Now, my mom slept downstairs, while my brother and I had a room upstairs. I got up from my bed and went to check on my brother. As I opened his bedroom door, I saw it was empty. I rushed downstairs and found the main door wide open. I freaked out and woke up my mom. We came out of the house and started calling for my brother. My mom was about to cry when we heard a chuckling sound coming from our backyard. We ran there and saw Jack standing under a tree. He was facing his back at us. I said in a broken voice.
Jackie, are you alright?
He suddenly turned towards us. I've never seen my brother like this. His eyes were blood red, and his face was filled with pain. He said in a rough voice.
He's buried here.
And then fainted on the ground. My brother caught a high fever the next morning. We called many doctors, but no one could tell exactly what was wrong with him. My mom became tense and worried. She hardly slept at night. One night, I saw my mom talking to our town's sheriff, standing at the doorway. After the sheriff left, I asked my mom what he was saying. My mom replied that the sheriff was going to close the next door neighbor's case file. They investigated a lot, but couldn't get a hold of the intruder who broke into their house that night. Suddenly, my eyes widened. I asked my mom.
Mom, what was the name of Mr. Feynman's son?
She replied.
I think it was William. Why do you ask?
My head started to throb in fear. Is this possible? All this time, the imaginary friend my brother was talking about was none other than our neighbor's dead son. I rushed to Jack's room. He was muttering something in his sleep. I got close to him and said,
Jack? Jack? Is William right here with you now?
You're just going to have to trust me. I am not making this up at all. My brother suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the corner of the room. As I followed his eyes, my heart sunk in fear. A teenage boy was standing in the darkness of the corner of the room. His eyes were pale white with small pupils gushing out of them. His face was particularly visible as his entire body was in the darkness. Dried blood spots were visible on his left cheek and forehead. He then looked at me and my brother. Jackie got out of his bed slowly. He then started to walk out of the room. I followed him. My mom was sitting in the living room. Suddenly seeing Jack walking on his own amidst this fever, she rushed to him. But before she could do anything else, I stopped her and told her everything. My mom and I came out of the house following Jack. Jack walked towards the backyard and stopped right in front of the tree. This tree was standing in the middle of our backyard and the backyard of our neighbor, Mr. Feynman. Jack then pointed towards the ground beneath the tree and said,
Dig here.
And then fainted to the ground. Without wasting a single second, I told my mom to call the sheriff. And she did right away. He came with another police officer. People in our neighborhood gathered in our backyard out of curiosity. In front of everyone, the cops dug under the tree. And what they found still disturbs me to this day. They found a bloody baseball bat wrapped in a bloody cloth buried under the tree. And the mystery unfolded, shocking our town once again. Mr. Feynman murdered his own son out of a fit of drunkenness. To save himself from the law, he decided to make up the entire story of the robbery. He injured himself, willing to make the situation more believable, and even secretly buried the murder weapon. Without the murder weapon, no cops would have ever caught this man.
911, what's your emergency?
That must have been why he wanted to move out so bad. The cops arrested him that day and took him into custody. Surprisingly, my brother Jack got completely better the very next day. We still live in that house, and I believe William has finally been able to rest in peace.